All right, here we go. This is called Surviving NGINX Ingress, specifically CVE, blah, 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 big numbers, right? And interestingly, I almost called this 28 days later, CVE 2021-25742 for good reason. This is the discussion on it. This is the NGINX Ingress issue on Kubernetes, and as you can see, it was created 28 days ago. There is a lot of comments and a lot of discussion about it. It was rated high, and you can just go through, and you don't want to read all this, right? There's a lot of information. I'm going to distill all this for you now, and give you an explanation of what it is, how it works, why it still works, and what you can do about it. So the crux of the problem is, well, NGINX Ingress. Primarily, when you create an ingress, which I'm sure a lot of you know, but for those of you who don't, it manages traffic coming into your cluster and pushes it to the right services and locations and pods and et cetera, right? The problem arises with the way this gets deployed. The ingress gets deployed typically by somebody with higher level access, admin access, for example. The ingress pod has a lot of clout. It has, well, I'll show you in a moment just how much. Now, when you create your application, you might create something called an ingress object, which is the rules under which the ingress will operate to feed traffic to your service in your application. That is that arrow. Now, the problem is that there's ways using something called snippets to change the behavior of the ingress via the rules, which is weird, right? Almost seems a bit dangerous, because it is. This is the role-based access control, a piece of the role-based access control for the Ingress controller, but the default deployment of the Ingress controller, which most people use. In fact, if you look at the instructions, the first line of how to deploy is a kubectl apply a long get URL to the default. Now, the important bits here, list secrets. And if you look at the defect description, custom snippets allows retrieval of token and secrets across all namespaces. Kind of the keys to the kingdom, right? Well, it has access, so why not? Shifting gears, to just try and define how this all happens. The ingress is NGINX. NGINX is managed by its configuration, which is nginx.conf. Inside the nginx.conf, there is lots of sections. It's deep. You can get into it. You can spend ages on it. But this is a small piece where, for example, you can have a default behavior for health C that returns 200. Super useful because we use these for liveness probes in Kubernetes, right? Just to make sure NGINX is alive. I don't have to actually have a root there. I can use my NGINX server settings to give me a response that tells me thumbs up. Amazing, super useful. But you can extend this to a really quite amazing degree with the Lua language. Now you can see an example here for slash. I'm just going to use the NGINX extension that Lua created for NGINX to just return HTTP not found. But once I have access to a whole programming language, well, what can I do with that, right? I wonder how much I can extend the capabilities of this. All right, so keep that in your noggin. And we'll go back to the way the ingress is defined. So if it's an nginx.conf, but I can create snippets that change the nginx.conf, really my nginx behavior is a combination of nginx.conf plus whatever snippets I put in my routing rules. All right. Here's a very simple example of me creating an ingress object and using a snippet. And here's what it looks like. Now, it's worth noting, there are 4 types of snippets. There's configuration, auth, I think, mod security, and then server. I'm going to focus on server. I'm going to dismiss the other ones for now, for convenience and for timing. Here, I'm just making a minor change for the better, actually, SSL server on. But you remember that nginx conf, to draw a line between the two, I could do that, and it would be perfectly legit. Yes, I can use the Lua language in my rules. So hopefully you're already thinking, danger, right? This is bad. Yeah. So here is what I've created. I have a kind cluster. And by the way, I am actually quite sick, so if I cough, I apologize. In here, I have -A. Let's just get everything. Let me just shuffle this over so you can actually see the result. Here's my ingress. It's already deployed using the basic defaults. Not much else. You can see I have a web application in the developer namespace. That's over here. Pretty straightforward. If I look at the deployment for the ingress, It's all here. I got a service account. Yeah. I have this very critical piece here. Allow snippet annotations. This is here by default. And for good reason. A lot of people use snippets. If we come way back over here and we look at my search of all of GitHub, you can see there's a lot of use of snippets. Here's a good example here. So I don't necessarily want to shut this down, and it's default by true for probably good reason. Okay, all right, fine. But what's kind of alarming is what we pointed out earlier. And I do hope this is big enough on your screen. The ability to list secrets, none of this is namespaced. All right, fine, so that exists. Let's shift over to my developer, or insider threat. Let's call him insider threat. I'm gonna do a same thing. I'm gonna say, okay, get pods. Let's just do like this. All right, I just have a web application. Why do I have a web application here? Well, because this person is running on a different capabilities. Their RBAC is totally namespace to developer. I can list, create, and do a lot of things to do with my application. And that's it. And I have created an Ingress for my application. Now, my web application is a basic Google Hello World, right? It sits on 8080. So if I do a curl localhost, because it's kind, lets me do that. Hooray, I get a 404, which is actually what I expect because my Ingress rules don't handle it. I did handle it though with one particular route. Oh, there it is. So that works. Huzzah. Let's take a look at what I did with my Ingress. I'm going to jump past all the nasty stuff. All right. Here are the routes that I created. Now, I wanted to get this all on the screen, so again, I hope it's big enough. You can see, don't hack this gold. They're all the same. They're referencing my 80 to my 8080, and then when I did don't, I got my hello world success. Seems to work. So what's all this other nonsense? Hack this gold. I don't know. It's weird, right? Let's try one. Let's do hack. Remember, I'm really restricted in this namespace. Oh, okay. I got a redirect permanently moved. All right. Well, that's interesting. It behaved differently given my route was exactly the same. All right. Exciting. We'll explore that in a moment. Let's just try this. Well, that looks bad. Why is there a CA cert on the screen? I should definitely not have access to getting any kind of CA cert. That's super strange. All right. So let's take a look at how that happened. And now let's look at the nasty bits of the Ingress. Here I have my server snippets. And they're all in a weird order. The one I just did was this. And you can see I've done it exactly as we thought. I've got location, this, content by Lua block. But now I'm exploring Lua well beyond probably what anybody necessarily intended. And I'm actually running a cat of the mounted service account token. The service account is associated with that very extensive RBAC. And I'm trying to read it in. Okay, that's interesting. And I was able to print out the service account token. All right. Above, I have this longer one called gold, which is a little bit scary, where you can see I'm grabbing the token. I'm actually running a curl command and I'm getting the results. Well, what happens if I do that then? That's looking maximum scary. So there we see exactly why this is a vulnerability. I have the entire cluster of secrets. I know a lot, right? More than you would know. Kind of giving me the keys to the, I'm a teenager giving the keys to the car. It's like, yes, I can now kind of do whatever I want. And if this cluster does important things and there are important secrets there, it's game over. This is a really big problem. And it wasn't hard for me to do that under a limited scope, provided I could create an Ingress. Now, that's what it's looking for. The worst thing about it is actually the one that looks the easiest. If we look at the Ingress again, and I jump down to the bottom, you see this very simple one here. Hack alias to slash. I'm like, well, that looks like I'm just sending hack to slash. Well, am I though? What if I type hack? Remember, it just didn't work, right? Okay, so what if I were to look for something specific, like, and let me just, if you're wondering why I'm fapping, I'm trying to cut corners by cutting and pasting. So apologies. I go select. What if I do that? Ah, I just pasted a path from the root of the actual underlying file system. Now I have access to the whole, do I have access to the whole file system? I think I might actually. What if I do a hack and I, just to be absolutely certain, and I do, you know, this old classic gem. Yeah, all right, that's not good. So what's interesting about that one, an inadvertent shameless plug, I work for Bridgecrew. So what was interesting about that is I was able to get access, and that's kind of a big one that it doesn't get mentioned a lot in the hack, in the sort of exploit at the moment. So how do we deal with this? We have to start creating rules. There isn't necessarily a fix out there yet. And a lot of the people have gotten together in the conversation to discuss different ways to do it. There's some really good OPA suggestions in there if you're into Open Policy Agent. I know the folks at Terrascan have done some good things. And us at Checkov did the exact same thing. The first thing, and the rule one is not necessarily cardio. The rule one that we decided to create within Checkov, and obviously other checks are available, is to just not let people use snippets at all. If we're creating an application, why don't we just check for that annotation and say, all right, you're not allowed to use it. Should be easy, right? It is actually pretty easy. And almost all tools out there are doing that now. So don't be surprised if you start to see that start to happen. It is a little noisy. Now, I have seen some people checking the deployment to see if allow snippet annotations is true. I actually kind of feel like that's a bad idea, and we haven't done that. Because for obvious reasons, when we looked at GitHub, people are using them everywhere. And it's the default of the deployment. So I don't want to start blocking defaults, right? It seems bad, particularly when they're really handy. All right, so that's the first thing that we did. The second one, don't be afraid to ask for help. We completely took this from a conversation. I think some of the major players in Kubernetes security were involved in creating regular expressions that can allow you to check for things. And the first thing we decided to check for was just looking for a snippet that has the Lua language in it. Lua is great for NGINX.conf, but it makes almost no sense for a snippet. Double tap. Let's also look for references to Kubernetes.io, the path to all the gold. Cool. And finally, we looked for that weird alias directive. You can see I've given the definition of it here where we're looking for alias, and you should almost never allow that, not as a snippet, no way. It's terrible. I didn't even find an example in GitHub, so that's a no-brainer. So that's what we did. We created things that are very specific to the exploits that we created, and that's what we're trying to do at the moment, because at the moment you want to keep using Ingress. You're not going to not use Ingress. And so the idea now is if I run Checkov on ingress.yaml, it's now there's 3 new rules that will all trigger that are going to find all of these. Any snippet at all, a snippet that contains Lua code, and of course the one that was has the alias. So they're all present and accounted for, so that you can know that in your supply chain it's not going to be a problem. So that was really the effort here, was more awareness around this is kind of a big deal. It does give you access to a lot of things. I'm going to pause for questions now and see. See if that was too fast, too deep. What do we think?
That was perfect, Steve. Honestly, like doing a live demo is terrifying enough as it is, but you did it during a live talk, which I have even more respect and admiration and fear for. I was actually going to ask you a question quite selfishly, because we were, earlier today we were talking about like security champions and sort of creating a culture which is which promotes, you know, fixing and remediating secure development. You highlighted to be able to actually go and ask for help. Like, don't be afraid to ask for help. So with something as complex and potentially, I don't know, nerve-wracking as security and being able to fix issues, how do you create an environment where people can confidently come and ask you for help?
Well, it depends where you're talking about that environment existing. Is this within an organization, or is this on the community generally? I mean, this particular example was part of open source, which already is very communicative, is always very open. And because the issue, as you saw, was placed on GitHub, we already had an open forum created. In addition to that, the CNCF Slack was a huge area for discussion, right? So there's lots of areas, and almost every company has a Slack channel that is about this. Now, if you're talking about internally, how do I ask for help? Well, then we have a long lightning talk about culture change to ensure that security has an open door and can discuss these things and educate developers is the best way to do things. So yeah, you created a pretty. Thanks for the easy question.
No, thank you so much for this presentation and the live demo as well. I mean, I personally looked quite scared throughout that entire demo, so I'm glad that you did it instead.
100%. I mean, thank you so much, Steve, as well, with obviously recovering from the flu or a cold, or we really appreciate you coming on the show. If anyone has any questions to Steve, as we mentioned before, during the show, find us on Hopin, post-show, find us on Slack, especially those questions sort of coming into, asking the community for help. I'm sure Steve would be happy to answer any of those questions. But again, thank you so much.
Cheers. Thanks very much for having me.